I, 31F, met my fiancé, 32M, 3 years ago. He came out of an abusive marriage just 2 years before we met. Essentially, she bled him dry, making him buy expensive jewelry, designer shoes, clothes, big house cars, Caribbean trips, you name it, she made him pay for it. She also took him to the cleaners in the divorce. However, my fiancé is very well off. He makes well over 6 figures, almost 7. On top of that, he inherited a large fortune from his grandfather, and his parents gifted him and his siblings something in the 7-figure range as well. So yes, the financial abuse was bad, but he does not suffer financially. He has more money than he will ever need. Last year, I moved into his house. I do not pay rent, but I split the bills and buy food. I also pay for my own clothes and jewelry, and I have a good job and can take care of myself. However, things have taken a turn for the worse, and I feel miserable. His house was empty when I moved in, like there was only hand-me-down furniture and maybe 3 forks and 2 knives. He wouldn't turn on the heating, so the house felt cold and moldy, and there were no curtains, no decorations. His ex took everything not bolted down, and he was too cheap to replace it. Imagine that, $1 million house looking like absolute poverty. I am grateful that I can live in his house. It is something I could never afford myself, but I didn't want to live in squalor. So I bought some kitchen supplies, some furniture, but at some point, I realized I was dipping into my savings all the time, and he did nothing. I looked into curtains, but those things are expensive, and his house has so many windows. I didn't want to pay for this anymore. I told him I needed a fund to furnish his house, and he blew up at me, saying I was just with him for his money. I pointed out all the money I spent on his house, the gifts and the trips, because he pays for nothing ever, because he wants to be sure I am not here for the money. The fact is, if we break up, I have nothing. The house is not mine, and if I spend all my savings on his house, I will be left with absolutely nothing. He wants a prenup, and I am fine with that, but I can't help but feel used. I hate that I feel jealous of his ex-wife. I feel like she was treated well, and I am neglected. He proposed to his ex on a cruise with a $10,000 white gold diamond ring, and I got rhodium-plated Swarovski stuff that might cost $100. The proposal was at a picnic in the park I organized, paid for groceries, and slaved in the kitchen for. I almost said no out of pure disappointment. However, I am afraid to bring it up and be called a gold digger. I don't want to be funding a millionaire's lifestyle. He loves everything as long as I pay for it, but as soon as he has to pay, it is frivolous and unnecessary. I can live like a poor person by myself. I would just be paying for my own lifestyle. Would I be wrong for calling off a wedding purely for financial reasons? Because I love this man, but I imagine our cheap wedding in contrast to his ex's extravaganza. Will our future kids be able to have some luxuries? What if I ever become a stay-at-home mom? Will I have to beg to put the heating on? Edit. To answer some questions I see a lot. I know the abuse is not made up. His family and friends told me separate stories of the abuse they witnessed. Not only did it confirm it, but it also showed me she was way more terrible than I thought. Like stealing heirloom jewelry from his grandma with Alzheimer's right after she was widowed and pretending she was gifted these things even though everyone knew grandma hated her guts. I did not realize he is doing the same to me as she did to him, and he is, maybe subconsciously, punishing me for what was done to him. I am not trying to force a lifestyle on him where he was previously happy. He told me before moving in that he left his house like this because he was depressed after his wife took everything, even the curtains, and that it makes him sad, and he wants a cozy home. He just didn't know where to start. His house is paid off, and he isn't actually spending much on utilities either. The house is very well insulated and has solar panels. It is weird to see how cheap being rich really is. I am not asking for designer furniture. I use IKEA frequently, and I have refurbished second-hand furniture myself. I'm actually pretty thrifty. I see where my jealousy over the ex's lifestyle might have triggered some people. Let me explain. A $10,000 ring is insane and stupid to me. I do not want that because I would fear losing it every day. I don't need an over-the-top wedding. However, it almost feels like he put effort into making her happy. With me, it almost feels like he wants to prove how little he can give me. He talked about how he would oversee the wedding expenses, and it is cheaper than my actually financially struggling cousin's wedding. I can't help but feel he wants to demonstrate how cheap he can treat me. I don't like to say it, but it feels like he gets off on it to some extent. We are almost talking about washing paper plates at this moment. Yes, I did discuss selling the mansion I really don't need and moving to a more modest house, especially knowing this is the house his ex picked, but he doesn't want to do that. He loves this house, but I feel really intimidated living in a house I could never afford anyway, and it has so many large windows, like just wow. I haven't talked to him yet, but a pause on the marriage and counseling is a must. I already am looking for individual counseling because I realized I might indeed be too much of a people pleaser, allowing him to control me with the ghost of his ex. I also am going to separate for a while and look to rent something for a few months so I can get some space. Thank you all for your insights. Update 1. Okay, I hope this update makes sense because I am very confused and not really doing that well at the moment. Well, Reddit, you changed my life. Thank you so much for all your ideas and insights. Honestly, I don't think I would have had the courage to do what I did without you guys. I went to therapy and took the day off just to get my racing mind to calm down, and therapy has confirmed things you guys suspected. I'm a people pleaser. I wanted to save him, and I have internalized the idea that any effort and every penny I want him to spend on me makes me a gold digger. I realized I would have never taken this treatment from any of my exes, even though I made more than them. The idea that I had to prove myself worthy to be with a millionaire and not be in it for the money got into my head pretty early. I called one of his siblings I am pretty close with and just told her everything. She was not surprised but just sad about how unhappy he was making me. She told me that from the day we started, he had this idea that I was out of his league. He struggled to understand why I wanted to be with him and probably just thought, it must be my money. She told me she had already talked to him in the past to treat me better, and she was furious about the proposal. This information confused me a little. I was a little hurt she never discussed any of this before, but she thought it was none of her business. She also explained how she and her husband organized their finances, as he also doesn't have as much as her. I took the opportunity to pack a bag. I haven't found a place yet, but I am going to stay with my parents. I made up my mind that I will at least want 6 months apart to get myself in order. I made sure my stuff was in the car because, honestly, I had no idea how the conversation would go. So, into the most difficult part, the talk. I waited for him to come home. He was pretty late, but I didn't want to sleep another night on this. Pretending I was fine while I was contemplating all this just ate me up. I had written down what I wanted to say, and I was so afraid the entire time. I didn't want to hurt him, and I didn't know how he would react. I opened by saying I was moving out and that I wanted to pause our engagement. He was very quiet and just sat down. I told him he really hurt me by calling me a gold digger, and that I am done walking on eggshells and feeling guilty for just wanting basic things. I told him I was unhappy and felt neglected. I also told him that after 3 years of me showing up for him, if he still doesn't think I am here for him, it is not going to happen. He was just quiet, not saying anything. I told him that the constant comparing to his ex was unhealthy and unfair, and punishing me for her sins was abusive. I told him comparing her to me all the time has triggered me comparing myself to her and starting to feel like she was worth more than me. One of the things about her was mostly ungratefulness. He would do nice things for her, but it was never enough. The thing is, he doesn't do nice things for me, and I have to be grateful for the pleasure of picking up the bill. I told him he was not ready for marriage, that I dreaded having kids with him and living like this, that I didn't trust he would take care of me if I became a stay-at-home mom. At that point, I just called him abusive and a user. I was getting pretty angry saying all this out loud, losing my composure and script a little bit. He remained quiet with almost no emotion on his face. I stayed quiet, but nothing came out, so I decided that I would just leave. Only when I got up to go did he say, "Please don't go." He asked me if I was pausing the wedding or calling it off. He wanted to know if it was over or if he still had a shot. I told him I wanted out of this house. I honestly don't want to live in his ex's palace of sadness anymore. I needed him to go to therapy, especially financial therapy, and I needed a separation. I told him I was open to couples counseling if he went into individual counseling. He begged me not to do the separation, but honestly, I really wanted it. I just told him to think about it, and I left him. He was finally showing some emotions. He was crying at this point. He sent me a very long text somewhere in the AM, telling me he was a wreck and couldn't sleep. He made all kinds of promises, that he would go into therapy, sell his house, buy a smaller one, and make sure I am taken care of, whatever happens. He said he would help me decorate, and we will make a home. He again asked me to please come home, but to me, it doesn't feel like home there anyway. I feel very empty and tired. I don't know if I actually want to go back if he does all that. I need some time to process. I will go back for the kitchen supplies and my TV, but I won't take anything else from the furniture. This is for the exact same reason I was unwilling to buy everything. His house is huge, so the couch is huge, and I can't bring it. Update 2. Hi everybody, let me just say I am overwhelmed by the number of people really caring about me and asking for updates. Strangers who care about you is a feeling like no other, thank you. So, as I said, I left. I'm looking for an apartment I can afford. My parents are helping out, and I am living with them and saving up. I am not closing all doors, but for now, we are broken up. I have no contact with him. The first week, he transferred a large amount to my account, and it really rubbed me the wrong way. It just showed me that he still thought that money was what kept me here. I deducted the couch I left and transferred everything else back and asked for no contact after this. He has been respectful of it, and I feel free at the moment. I felt guilty for my needs, for wanting to be taken out every once in a while. The longer I am out, the more I realize it was abuse. I have an autoimmune problem, and the cold house caused it to flare up. Even after that, he kept turning the heat down. He would rather have me miserable than pay what, $100 extra at the end of the year? The last thing I heard is that he put the Palace of Sadness on the market. I have seen the ads, so I am happy he is going through with that. I heard from his sister that he is in therapy, and I am happy for that and I hope he keeps that up. He is keeping his promises so far, but I need to see real change, and even then, I really don't know. I am building my own life by myself, and maybe I'll get a puppy. If I give him another shot, it has to start all from scratch. Update 3. Thank you to everyone reaching out to me. I have closed in on a little apartment for myself and got a puppy. After being home with my parents, I realized how sad, cold, and alone I had been. Over time, I went blind to a lot of things. Blind to a comfortable home temperature, comfortable with thinking about every penny spent, feeling guilty for buying that dress I wanted for so long that was finally on sale, and feeling entitled for wanting date nights and being treated sometimes. I started to think about what makes me happy. I love to travel, dress up to go to a nice restaurant, throw dinner parties, entertain people, think about Christmas gifts 6 months in advance, and have a cozy house. I realized just how much he had taken from me with that one little sentence. Is that really necessary? I know now that abusers are not, by definition, bad people. He is broken, and he has trauma I have no time or energy for. He got free from abuse and, sadly, became the abuser. I know he is in therapy, and we initially agreed on 6 months of no/low contact, but I felt certain it was not for me anymore, and I didn't want to keep him dangling. Breaking up with him was very hard. I never wanted to hurt him, and I loved this man very deeply. I wanted us to be each other's happily ever after. We both came from dark places, and I wanted us to thrive together. His family told me I was the one, I was everything he was looking for, and I felt so lucky. But we only have one life, and he has so much work to do before he even becomes the bare minimum of what I needed. I feel like I failed, like my story has a bad ending. I feel very broken and sad. I will take my time to just be me, and I hope he does the same. I truly hope he finds the one and becomes happy. Mostly, I hope that for myself, but for now, I am enough by myself with the pupper. Thank you all for your time and support. I'm going to have a little cry in some fur baby's fluffy fur. Update 4. Op responding to a comment almost 1 year later. The money I spent on my ex is gone. I'm not going to get that back or fight for it. I even had to block him because at some point he got petty and wanted me to pay rent for the time I lived with him, so no way was I opening that discussion. Whatever, lesson learned. I may look poor compared to millionaires, but I am doing fine. The sister and I got along for a while. We shared a hobby and talked about that, but recently, I have been official and out in the open with my new boyfriend, and she struggles with this. Maybe she was hoping it would still work out or something, I don't know, but she has been a lot colder. People say never settle because there is better out there for you, but I never believed it. Honestly, I was ready to be a crazy dog lady for the rest of my life. I was enjoying being single, but my friends urged me to start dating just to get the hang of it. He was my third date. I went against my will and was 100% not into it, but when I saw him in real life, OMG, sparks flew like never before. I am in my 30s, so you would have thought I experienced it all. He is everything my ex was not. He is kind and caring, cooks me dinner, gets flustered but is grateful for the gifts he gets. He treats me to dinners and will not even allow me to go Dutch on it. He has planned and booked dates and trips months in advance, even before we were well and official. He is not as wealthy as my ex, but he makes a good living. His income is comparable to mine, but he treats me like a queen, and between me and you, and all Redditors who dig this deep in the comments, the lovemaking is insane. So please, take away this, never settle, ever, and trust the process.